swap. Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. My name is Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me I have some more RPG horror stories. I'm honestly glad that the shorts are coming off pretty well, and I noticed there's a lot of popularity towards me as a VTuber avatar. Maybe I'll talk more about it in shorts, like about the process of me making my avatar. The algorithm is really weird. It's about as random as rolling a d20, but the d20 is weighted to be more on a natural 1 than a natural 20, and it's just like, I don't get it. But you know what I do get? RPG horror stories, which means we have some more today. Let's get the first RPG horror story for today. Pathfinder Guy Stories. Hello, I'm the person who submitted this story about the exploding lock. He said on YouTube that all submissions are welcome, so I thought I'd submit a series of stories I've typed up about the same guy. I've been a fan of your channel for quite a while now, and it's always nice to see the stories you read, so I hope you'll give this one a fair shot. Feel free to read any, all, or none of these entries and edit them as you see fit. After like a half a year of doing this, I have such a wonderful community of people that are willing to submit me stories. Because like, you putting your stories into my hands, into my feeble tiefling hands to read through and properly present them in videos and stuff. And I just want to say thank you so much for submitting your stories to me, for real. Now, let's learn about the Pathfinder Guy. Part 0.5. The most awkward role I've ever had to make. A version of this story was previously read by Crow's Perch, but I'm including it here for context with a few edits. I first met Pathfinder Guy through his wife, a friend of mine who I met through a comic she was drawing at the time. She's not that important to this story, or the ones that follow, as she dropped out of this campaign fairly early on for unrelated reasons. But it gives context to how I even know him. One of the first games I ever played with him was a Pathfinder 1e game he refers to as Epic Game. It was his attempt to run a game inspired by epic linear fantasy stories such as Lord of the Rings, etc. This story takes place during Epic Game. There was no Session 0, at least that I was part of, but I had made some of the things I'm not comfortable with known beforehand. That's good, but Session 0s are pretty important to make sure that everybody is on the same page. I was a late addition to the group due to some honestly sitcom-worthy scheduling issues, so I ended up being handed a pre-existing NPC to run, a character he'd used in other games who was a bard raised by a royal family as a courtesan and spy. We had all agreed that there would be no explicit sex talk at the table, but apparently there was miscommunication about the definition of explicit. The game started with a demonic attack on a royal wedding, and we moved quickly to investigate. A line of inquiry that led us to the mansion of a noble involved in a cult that had summoned the demons. Our rogue wanted to sneak in and search for documents that would incriminate the noble, and so I stepped up. My time to shine, I thought. I decided to seduce the noble, expecting to make a charisma check and fade to black. And while that's essentially what happened, there were some extra steps. So I make my check and I knock it out the park, and we move to the guy's bedroom. Then the GM, in voice chat, in front of the entire group, explains that I need to make a performance check to fake it. But I'm super embarrassed at this point, but this whole group is laughing, so I kind of laugh along and I make the roll. Maybe it would have just ended there, except natural 20. The guy stops in the middle and says, "Man, I knew I was good at sex, but I didn't know I was that good." Wait, hold on a second. Why do you have to fake it? What if you actually enjoy it? I don't know. Is that a weird thing to ask? In fairness, the moment was hilarious, but it was definitely more than I'd originally signed up for. Later, we corrected the misunderstanding and I also opened up more with that group, but it was definitely a bit cringe at the time. And the GM was, well, there are other reasons I don't play with that guy anymore, which you'll soon see. Part 1. Appetizer Course. So, to more properly introduce Pathfinder Guy, subject to the exploding lock story and the GM I spent an unfortunate amount of time playing with, I'd like to share some very short incidents and anecdotes. Not quite enough to warrant on full stories with the class. To recap, this is a GM who was the husband of a friend I met via being a fan of her webcomic and became closer to when we found out we all play TTRPGs. As a GM, it was his policy that all canon roleplay set in one of his games needed to have him present to adjudicate. This sounds reasonable, and it was for the most part, until you start thinking pretty hard about the implications of the fact that this also includes private ERP between PCs, which he outright encouraged and occasionally even initiated. Trying to argue the point that he has to be there to adjudicate all of roleplay, including erotic roleplay, to make sure it stays within the canon, that's clearly a lie. He just wants to be there to just crank it in a corner while listening to y'all do the hanky-panky or describe verbally the hanky-panky y'all doing. See, the thing is, I don't see how erotic roleplay between player characters that are consenting to this has anything to do with his presence. It's almost like he just wants to be a spectator for it, like a voyeur, just watches people have sex. That's kind of his thing at this point. You never know, maybe it's his thing. Probably, I don't know. A really strange argument to make when it comes to erotic roleplay, ERP, where people are just doing it in private just to get, I don't know, just to get the rocks off. He wants to be there to adjudicate. Adjudicate what? How much somebody came inside of someone? Or how much orgasm the other person had? Or they're rolling how much moans they've done in a second? What? This seems bizarre, but let's continue. During the game he was running for me, my husband and my best friend's male character became romantically involved with an NPC. He outright solicited her, over 10 years younger than him, to ERP a scene with him, and when she declined, he still had her roll of fortitude save to avoid getting her in-game girlfriend pregnant. But this guy, not only does he want to watch ERP happen, he also wants to be part of the ERP. Christ. A giant bug lands on your arm. What do you do? My friend, new to TTRPGs, I attempt to attack with my knife. Okay, but if you miss it, especially if you critically fumble, you'll stab yourself and possibly cut your own arm off. Sorry, that's just how it works, since it doesn't make sense otherwise. What? Okay, I'm starting to change my mind about critical fumble tables. But like, this makes no sense. If you have a bug in your arm and you just want to use your little knife to stab it, I mean, I guess you could always fumble it. I don't know. It feels like it's just too punishing for the sake of punishing. And especially to a new player, that's mean to do. To give him a little bit of leeway, let him learn the mechanics. One of the campaigns he runs over and over, he has about 3 to 4 with a few variations of each that he runs multiple times, is about an NPC who is the chosen one, who has to put together the pieces of an ancient magic sword. Without her in the party, you cannot defeat any plot-relevant encounters because only she can wield the sword. Sometimes he graciously allows one of the players to play her. Other times, she joins the party as the love interest of his favorite male PC. He outright refers to her as the main character and claims he can't do anything to change this because his world decided she was the chosen one. That is such a load of crap. You are the DM. You can decide who is the chosen one. And forcing a main character DMPC onto your party if your players don't want to do this whole thing is such a bold thing to do. This guy basically put in his favorite waifu into the campaign and made the campaign all about her, when the campaign should involve your players. There's nothing wrong with having DMPC waifus in the slightest. I honestly encourage it. I would allow it. To make the campaign all about them, let the players choose to decide what happens to the world and how the story progresses. Use DMPCs to support your main cast, the players, not to screw them over. His total not a self-insert in his Star Wars D6 game is Tony Stark in space. He runs a company that is a secret front for the rebellion and is hiding Jedi. He's a super genius inventor who is responsible for all the major homebrew technology in the world, and is only one of multiple DMPC Pathfinder Guy has in his homebrew Star Wars setting. In one of the Star Wars campaigns, he's one of the primary quest givers and can do whatever the plot wants. Once, while GMing Star Wars for my mom, he was salty about the fact that she found a way around his cleverly designed gotcha trap. So he had her backup starship crash through the roof of the building she was stealthily investigating just so he had an excuse to arrest her and move the plot along, and insisted there was no possible way they could have rendezvoused or other way the plot could have interpreted her asking to be picked up. These are just a few short examples of the adventure of Pathfinder Guy, aka Star Wars Guy. Stay tuned for more. And guess what? We have more. 4 parts. Let's get to part 2. With your appetites properly wet, it is time to talk about the first worst part of playing Pathfinder with Pathfinder Guy. His grasp on combat mechanics, or rather, lack thereof. This is a man who has no idea how to make Pathfinder combat work, or rather, he knew how to make it work, but didn't know how to make it fun. Today I'll present my first example of combats with Pathfinder Guy. This comes from the same campaign as the dice roll story, which Pathfinder Guy called Epic Game. In story point 5, the most awkward dice roll, I mentioned that the campaign he ran began with a demon attack on a royal wedding. One of Pathfinder Guy's problems was that he had a lot of players who were very good at character optimization. He had learned through years of hard experience that throwing one mega boss at a party of well-built PF1E characters was an object lesson in powers of action economy. One of his oldest friends, and the man who taught him to GM, we'll call him Paladin, was in that game with us. And so Pathfinder Guy went to him for advice. Paladin gave him a very common piece of advice for PF and D&D GMs. When trying to make combat hard, it is better to use a lot of small monsters than one mega boss. Pathfinder Guy took that a bit too literally. We arrive at the royal wedding. Paladin's character, a paladin who was also the prince of the nation, is there because his sister is getting married. My bard is there as a diplomat. The others are there for various reasons. Watching the happy bride and groom say the vows and then several hooded guests throw off their cloaks to reveal they're all lesser demons. How many several, you might be asking? 20. I don't think I need to tell you how much of a mistake this was. Pathfinder combat can take a long time at best of time, and there were 5 players, an NPC, boss cultist, and 20 demons. Their initiatives, thank God, were grouped, but I don't know how to describe how boring it was to sit through that enemy turn. In addition, another member of the group, who is a horror story of her own, got angry because she noticed the cultist was invisible and trying to get away and was planning to do something on her turn. And I did something to reveal him. Very fire maybe? It's been a long time. And ruin her cool moment. So throughout the demon's turn, I also had to listen to her complaining about how her entire scene and character moment was ruined by me. The session took 4 to 5 hours? 4 to 5 hours? Wait, for combat alone? Or is it just a session of almost entirely combat? And they had to stop in the middle because it was taking so long. Cue more bitching from the whiny player because he never stopped combat in the middle. And it took another 30 to 45 minutes at the start of the next session. Pathfinder Guy was immediately, gently, lectured by Paladin about restraint in running combats at the end of that session, and he did apologize. I think he also ended up reducing the number of demons between sessions, though I can't be sure. This was 10 years ago now. Still, it was a sign of things to come, both in that campaign and those that followed. Well, good thing we have all the parts. Let's get to the next part, part 3 of Pathfinder Guy. This is the second combat-related story for Pathfinder Guy, who I will henceforth be abbreviating as PFG. Feel free to read it however you like if you decide to read it in a video. Comes from a different game than 20 Demons and the most awkward role. This one of the ones they called the Karma game, and it took place in a standard homebrew world. There were a few problems with this game, but I'll be focusing on just one for now. The game was for myself, my best friend playing a half-elf rogue prince, who I'll call Prince, and my husband playing a monk, who I'll call Monk. My husband is the kind of person who loves build crafting. Monk's feats were planned out for every level up and tier of play. All her build decisions were made beforehand. He wanted her to have this awesome trip build that's impossible in Pathfinder, where you can trip someone and then you can attack of opportunity them when you get up like 8 times or something. At full build, it would have been ridiculous, and he was super excited about getting to play it. I did later hear that the trip build is notoriously busted and upsetting to play with, but nobody actually mentioned that to Monk or I at any point during the story. He theory crafted the build himself and had no idea that it had a reputation. This gets into the problem this story focuses on. Remember when I said Pathfinder Guy is just really bad at balancing combat? Well, he's also really bad at taking people's builds into account, and he refuses to adjust rules as written for overall player fun. All monsters in Pathfinder 1E have an innate defense against combat maneuvers, like being tripped, disarmed, or having their weapons broken. By rules as written, for any monster that is not bipedal, this gets a stacking bonus just against trip for every pair of legs they have. If the entire campaign is basically set of rules as written to basically not allow the monk to be able to play their build, man, I can imagine Monk is going to be feeling pretty useless and pretty crappy about not able to contribute to anything going on. I feel like as a DM, you should probably try to be considerate of that and maybe change some things around to allow them to do those things, because it sounds like the monk is going to have a really terrible time playing if they literally cannot trip anybody when they're making a full trip build. Every single fight we did that game was against insects, giant spiders, dire wolves, everything but humanoids. Did Pathfinder Guy, who had been told specifically in session 0 and multiple times over the course of the game that this was build Monk was going for, tell Monk that he didn't like this build and suggest Monk play something else? Nope. Did Pathfinder Guy mitigate this anti-trip defense so Monk could get to use the one thing she built for? Nope. Did Pathfinder Guy alter his encounters in any way after he realized that Monk couldn't do what she built for? Nope. Sounds like Pathfinder Guy and your husband should have had a talk out of game, and to find a solution, maybe have your husband re-roll the monk to a different build, or actually make it so that the monk could actually do something for once. Monk went to Pathfinder Guy after a 3rd or 4th straight combat against essentially untroopable enemies and let him know that he was not having fun. He laid out his concerns about the fact that the build was very excited to play wasn't working out and asked for advice. Pathfinder Guy offered to allow him to change his build, but expressed his regret that his world just told him these were the kinds of encounters that fit with the plot. I kept on going, everything the same way. He also then tried to shoehorn a class change for cleric or Paladin onto Monk as a way of explaining her build change in-game, but we'll get to that in another story. Even after Monk changed her feat allotment, she still was very bitter about the whole thing, especially since after Monk's feat changes was suddenly started encountering humanoids who could be tripped. Funny thing that, wow, you know, that kind of sounds like those done on purpose. Huh, Pathfinder Guy wouldn't do this on purpose, would he? He wouldn't try to screw over players' enjoyment for the sake of not letting them play a busted build, quote unquote, simply because they want to make sure that their campaign does not get stomped by the trip. Would they? It was also after that the Pathfinder Guy took over the game, making it entirely about his DMPCs, but that's another story. In the end, Pathfinder Guy kept forcing more and more things into Monk's story and built against his wishes until the game basically fell apart for other reasons. And no, Monk never got to trip even a single enemy. After that experience and one more indifferent GM's 5e game, Monk no longer plays monks, ever. Despite them formerly being his favorite class, he felt completely unheard, unlistened to, and used for a long time. He quit the hobby altogether, as did Prince, who didn't come up in the story, but I will feature in later entries in the Pathfinder Guy saga. After I tapped up a bulk of this, I told Monk that I was submitting the story, and he added some more details that I don't remember. The build he changed to was focused on movement speed and dashing, so you could race to all corners of the map to exert his presence. Immediately after he used this movement speed for the first time, Pathfinder Guy shut him down, started targeting his character every time she tried to do anything, despite her lack of damage, because he was upset about how fast she could move and how far she could go in a turn, despite this being one of Monk's most iconic niches in Pathfinder. Also, he reminded us that the reason we did no damage was once again because Pathfinder Guy was terrible at handing out treasure, so he found literally no Monk weapons, and you ruled against Monk being able to use their quarterstaff with her martial arts damage die despite it being a Monk weapon. Though I don't remember if this is just a Pathfinder thing or a change to rules as written. Either way, to have your hobby, your interest in a class be ruined by a single guy that just really has a vendetta against you, like your husband was literally targeted by Pathfinder Guy because he found problem in some of the most iconic features of a class. Be able to trip. We can't have that. If the Monk can trip every enemy, then suddenly my enemies are just gonna be useless. Let's change the build to make it so they can rush over. But you can't have that. Suddenly they can move everywhere. We gotta target them, make sure they die real fast. Somebody has a build that makes it remotely somewhat competent. We can't have that. We gotta nerf it to the ground because I'm scared of the whole thing. I had a DM that genuinely hated casters to the point where he built his campaigns and his sessions and everything around making sure that casters felt utterly useless. I couldn't do anything. Going invisible, suddenly enemies would notice me regardless of what I did. Use tongue to try to talk people diplomatically, they would just find offense and everything that I did would start attacking me immediately. Enough of me getting heated. I fully support your husband in this whole endeavor, and I hope they come back to play Pathfinder altogether and play with somebody that is not a crappy DM. Because the issue here is not the build, it's not the players having fun, it's not what the players are building or what the kind of class they're playing. It's about a terrible DM that is building encounters to try to screw people over for whatever reason and targets people for trying to even have a semblance of wanting to play and have fun. Your husband's monk character was punished for your husband wanting just to play a monk and have some fun and use its features. Wow, what a scary thing. Can't have Monk running around all over the place with a high movement, or can't have them trip and then make it a trip build. Gotta make sure we screw it over. We got a part 4 for this, so let's go ahead and finish up about Pathfinder Guy in part 4. In this Pathfinder Guy story, we're taking a bit of a break from our combat theme to talk a bit more about Monk and Pathfinder Guy's general overenthusiasm for his own ideas, to the point of failure to listen to his players, with a heaping side dose of squick and dubious content on top of it. A dubious disclaimer that at the time this happened, none of us really saw the red flags and what had happened. It wasn't until dissecting what exactly about this game made us uncomfortable and stopped wanting to play much later that we realized how messed up the situation was. Characters in the story are the same as last story. Myself, I played 2 characters in the campaign, both female, an Anthro Tiger Magus, and a human Paladin. Pathfinder Guy as the GM, my husband Monk playing a female monk, and my best friend Prince playing a male half-elf rogue, was also a prince. Last we left our interpreted adventures with Pathfinder Guy's Karma game, Monk had completely changed his character's build because it wasn't working out with Pathfinder Guy's world. However, Pathfinder Guy had this great idea about a way to integrate Monk more into the story. In fact, his world has reached out and spoken to him and told him exactly how you could bring Monk into the game so you could feel like his character was finally connected to the plot, an issue Monk had been having with the game for a while. We come to a town that worships the moon goddess, who is also the goddess of love and shapeshifters. Think Menthenia from Final Fantasy XIV, though he didn't play. Mixed with Saloon from D&D during one of her sacred holidays. Monk is told she feels tired and we need to find an inn. So we do. That night, the goddess comes to Monk in her dreams and tells her, congratulations, she is now a handmaiden, a special chosen champion of the moon goddess, and if she wants to multi-class into cleric, she can do so. Also surprised, the goddess is in love with her, and she wants to bang now. Good lord, the breakneck speed at how fast this thing goes. You just arrive to a town, you take a little snooze, wake up, good job, you're a handmaiden, also the goddess wants to bang. Pathfinder Guy seems like he at least on the outer side, he pretends like he has good intentions and positive intentions for the players, but in practicality, in reality, the actions do not match the words in the slightest. He says he wants the best for the players or something nice for the players and wants to try doing something for the players, but instead he's just trying to screw players over, and that is the worst part about it. Many people will probably be like, why don't you leave early when this stuff was happening? Clearly there was so many red flags. I can tell from my personal experience that if you're having fun in a game, you had good memories in a game, you'll inadvertently end up without on purpose trying to ignore some of the bad stuff because look at all the good stuff that I had in the past, look at all this fun moment and this lovely moment, and basically lying to yourself as if you're living in a dream. But at some point you gotta wake up from the dream like the OP has done here, and now they're able to recollect and write about this stuff normally. So some people are just stuck in a dream, y'all. You gotta give them a little bit of time to wake up. Monk, the player, my husband, is understandably pretty shocked, but Pathfinder Guy pushes the situation heavily. This is all going on in private RP, I believe, so I only knew about this because a Monk was telling me about it as it happened with Skype on mute. I played over the internet, and of course Monk and I lived together at the time and told me more afterwards. Monk was in character pressured to have sex with the goddess, and since she had agreed to be a bit of a plot monkey, Pathfinder Guy's words, a bit of an understatement made, he felt like he didn't have a choice but to accept. But if he didn't accept this offer, his character would have no connection to the story. This romance was forced on him essentially against his will and without his buy-in, other than the GM's equivalent of, trust me bro, this is going to be so cool. Pathfinder Guy also offered to ERP their sex scene later. The Monk declined. It ended up being a fade to black with no ERP ever planned, but it really squicked Monk out. Yeah, because he basically told, hey, ERP with me, bro, or you're not getting any part of the story. Everybody would feel weirded out about that point. I would feel weirded out if I had to ERP with somebody in order to get even a crumb of story. At that point, I would have just fucking left, dude. This Pathfinder Guy sounds fucking ridiculous. I'm laughing because it sounds so absurd, but I mean, weirdly enough, I know somebody that specifically would allow someone to be part of a more grand story for their game, only they became a romance partner with them IRL. It's a whole fucking other story to tell myself, but I'm gonna hold off on that. Let's continue. There was supposed to be the farewell session for my first character too, as I hadn't been having fun playing her for various reasons, and as the icing on the cake, Prince was left high and dry with nothing going on with her character, as Monk got dub-conned by a goddess and my character found out her in-character boyfriend, the GMPC cleric, was a werewolf and decided to run away to help him find a cure. A scene that felt super rushed and shoehorned in because Pathfinder Guy didn't want to keep him around without my character since they were connected. TLDR, GM's great idea of how to make my husband fit better into the campaign was to force his character into a lesbian relationship with a love goddess and make them bang. The only bang that happened is the clash of this campaign because it's just a bust. Not like a bust as in like a chest, like busted, like broken, like shattered to pieces, because this is not worth. I mean, I'm glad y'all woke up from this nightmare that this game is and decided to just basically dip and not play with it. I'm hoping y'all not playing with this guy. I'm hoping this is a story of what has happened and you basically done. You haven't confirmed if you're fully finished with this guy, at least nothing that I've seen so far. I'm hoping this is the last chapter of you dealing with Pathfinder Guy and never have to deal with him again. But either way, Miri, thanks so much for your story submission. I loved reading about Pathfinder Guy, and I hope we all learned a lot about what not to do from Pathfinder Guy. And with that, that's gonna be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales tomorrow. Bye-bye.